Hey folks, this is Kalani. We've been playing patch 8.3 for 2 weeks at this point. We've seen the changes to the 2 zones that make up a lot of 8.3's world content. We've been able to work our way through some horrific visions to start upgrading our cloak. The new Mythic Plus affix has been giving me new hope for the Mythic Plus system, and we've had a good look at the Ny'alotha raid on normal and heroic. But how is the patch actually shaping up? Is this patch worth your $15 a month to keep playing, or to maybe come back to play the game? Let's break it all down and I'll give you my thoughts on patch 8.3 so far. The big feature coming into this patch is definitely the horrific visions. It's something a bit different, a little bit new, solo content that you can progress through at your own pace by yourself, or you can invite a few friends over to argue about who gets to throw down the sanity balls. The difficulty scales up depending on how deep you go into the vision, and we also have an option to add difficulty on later on in return for greater rewards with the masks. So there's definitely longevity here, which is always nice in a system that turns out to be fun. I've been having a blast with horrific visions so far, and everyone I talk to in games seems to love the system as a whole. You can go in solo and see how far you can get, maybe take your best friend through and work through it together, or you can try and stomp it as a group of 5. I've had a mix of all 3 so far, and I have fun almost no matter who I go into the vision with. It's really nice being able to cover each other's weaknesses and trade cooldowns as you go through the waves of trash and mini-bosses. I've actually been tinkering around on an alt mage in Visions 2, and it's been going surprisingly well. I enjoy how each area is different and requires a different approach. The mini-bosses feel beefy enough and dangerous enough for you to actually care about them. I will always prefer a dangerous mini-boss with less health compared to a damaged sponge that takes forever to die, but doesn't ever pose a real threat, so I'm definitely happy in that regard. The fact that we have 2 different visions that swap every week helps to keep things a bit newer too. I'm looking forward to the swap back to Ogrimmar to push for the full clear, and then we'll be able to full clear Stormwind the week after that for sure. There's mini power-ups, you can unlock the ability to see secret chests, you can approach the zones in whichever way you want, and it's actually challenging. This is the kind of content that we need more of. The Horrific Vision system as a whole is a huge success from my personal experience, and from what my friends and guildies have shared with me. There's just one glaringly obvious problem. All of the praise for this system is always followed by a but, and the same phrase always follows that but. I wish I could do more of them. This might be the most enjoyable part of patch 8.3, and we're severely limited in how often we can run them. There's a whole back and forth on this topic about how we could enter and play through visions without a vessel, but then maybe shouldn't get any rewards. Maybe visions should just be open and only reward AP sometimes. Maybe we should be able to get way more vessels and run as often as we want. The list goes on, but it is a problem for a lot of players that we can't play the best part of this patch as often as we might like. The other problem is the whole save your vessels for rank 14, otherwise you're going to be behind thing. So even if you want to run extra visions, you might also feel like you just want to save them because you don't want to get behind later. That limits your runs even further. Personally, I've only run 2 horrific visions this week on my main because I want to save up some vessels to bash out rank 14 and rank 15 as quickly as possible when we finally get there. That's a bit of a shame in my opinion, but it's totally my choice. Having the system be a bit more open would have been nice, but the coalescing visions buff to the daily quests actually helped quite a lot in this regard. We're now able to easily run 4 visions per week instead of just 3, so that's at least 1 more you can squeeze in. I would have preferred some option to play the system endlessly, but managing and balancing the rewards around that sounds like a huge pain. One idea that I thought was great cropped up in Discords and on Reddit. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could enter horrific visions without a vessel, but instead of the usual loot, it was just AP? The more bosses and areas you clear, the more AP you can farm. It would be like the new island expeditions, except actually fun. I think the idea has some merit, but I wonder if the fact that we're limited to just the 3 or 4 visions a week prevents us from burning ourselves out on it. If you could run, or if you had to run, a lot of horrific visions every week for AP, would that ruin the excitement for you? What do you think about that alternative? Let me know in the comments below. This system and how it's received is sure to influence the development of the Tower of Torghast for next expansion, so I'm really curious what you would actually prefer. I hope the tower is much more open and we can freely run that as often as we want regardless of rewards, but anyway, if soloable or small group content that scales, that provides you with a good challenge, lots of options of how to approach it, and some great rewards sounds awesome to you, then I think patch 8.3 is definitely worth your time. I would probably play this patch just for horrific visions right now. I think they're that good. Just be aware that it does come with limitations and you can only do them a handful of times each week. That seems to be its only downside though. To get into horrific visions, you're going to have to spend some time in the weekly and daily activities of the game, so let's talk about those next. The weekly assaults are currently one of the most valuable activities in the game. They reward you with a huge chunk of coalescing visions and a cache of loot 3 times per week if you get all of the assaults done. Those caches seem to be spitting out corrupted gear for a lot of players, so that's something to take into consideration as well. Personally, I think the assaults themselves are just a means to an end. They're not particularly exciting by themselves, and it's more of a vehicle of getting you into the zone and tinkering around with the dailies, events, rares and chests than anything else. Sure, they pack a pretty nice reward, but taking part in the assaults isn't anything too special. I can see this getting old very fast, but because they're so closely tied to the horrific vision system, they're more or less required content to get done. The daily quests are very much in the same vein. We've seen them 100 times at this point, and they don't ever seem to change, but that's fine. I don't think daily quests are going to be exciting in any capacity, and they're just here to fuel another reward source. The dailies in patch 8.3 give you a lot of coalescing visions to help you run horrific visions, and they also provide you with one of the only good sources of rep for the 2 new factions. It's something to keep you busy and give you a reason to log in every day, but that doesn't mean it's actually fun to work through. I'm curious to know why they moved away from the world quest system entirely for this patch. For Ny'alotha we had some world quests and some daily quests, but for patch 8.3 it's literally just all daily quests outside of the single assault world quest. World quests were at least easier to complete because there was no back and forth, and it had the potential to be a bit more interesting. You don't see daily quests that ask you to match runes or hop on a turtle shell and decimate an army, or really anything fun. They're all just a list of chores. I wonder how this would have looked with world quests instead of daily quests, and I'm curious to see what we get more of in Shadowlands. There is one daily quest that's at least a bit different in patch 8.3. The Minor Vision daily quest asks you to complete a specific objective in the smaller visions that accompany the Black Empire Assault Zone. The sanity bar time limit keeps you on your toes and discourages you from standing in all of the shiny swirly purple stuff, and you actually have to focus on getting your daily done. It's more interesting because there's a chance you can fail. A very, very, very slim chance, but hey, at least it's there. I usually complete the daily within the first minute of being in the vision, so it's kind of an empty threat, but at least it's more interesting than kill 3 rare monsters. I feel like the minor visions could have been put to better use than just completing one daily quest, but I guess the dev team didn't really know what they wanted it to be. Originally, you could actually farm a good amount of coalescing visions from minor visions, and you had to play quick and smart to stay sane for a long period of time. They didn't like openly farming coalescing visions, so that ended up being nerfed into oblivion, and nothing ever really took its place, so we're left with one daily quest, and that's kind of it. The events scattered around the zone are a lot more fun in my opinion. They feel more like world quests than daily quests, which is a bit weird. They more or less are world quests, just without the world quest marker and without appropriate rewards. The worst part is that the events are more fun, but they're worth way less than a daily quest at this point. So all in all, the daily content isn't all that exciting as you might expect of daily content, but the real key here is that the fun stuff like horrific visions are locked behind your participation in the daily content. The more dailies you do, the more assaults you take part in, the more events you clear each day, the more horrific visions you can run every week. That's where the fun lies. It's kind of like second-hand fun for the dailies. That might sound boring and frustrating, but at least it's motivation to get some stuff done, and you're working towards all sorts of other rewards like reputation at the same time. You can also get a lot of artifact power from daily activities, so you hit so many birds with one stone, and you get the fun stuff after the fact. But if you absolutely hate daily content, and you find the assaults to be boring and uninspired, this patch probably isn't the best thing for you, because the really good stuff is still locked behind the daily grind, at least partially. Personally, I don't mind the daily content right now. It's not exciting, but it's not terrible either. I'll get it done because I love the horrific visions. I love to have reps at Exalted to benefit from the rewards, even if I don't particularly like how we get there, and I just like to complete everything a patch has to offer. I usually drop daily content like a rock when I'm done with reps, but this time I think I'll keep it going so I can run more horrific visions. So that's kind of a first to this expansion. When it comes to Mythic Plus, I think this might be the best affix we've ever had. Reaping is a bit of a tie for me because I love the affix for obvious reasons. Who doesn't love a good AoE fest once in a while? But this affix gives us a lot more options for approaching the dungeons. You can skip almost anything you want. All you have to do is play around with the mini-bosses and the obelisks. You can skip forwards, skip backwards, skip large annoying trash packs, skip ahead of a boss to backtrack slightly to aggro it from the other side. The options are definitely there, and we can finally skip without needing a rogue or two in the party at all times. Some of these dungeons just weren't set up with fun in mind. That's why we get the crazy stupid trash packs in one half of the dungeon, and then almost nothing to worry about in the other half. Instead of cramming us into specific paths like they tried to do with emissaries and the beguiling affix, because half of the dungeons aren't really fun to play through, they're letting us play through the dungeon in almost any way we want. That's the better approach in my opinion. Give us the tools to have fun, and if we skip over the same trash pack every single time we run the dungeon, then that's probably thanks to just bad dungeon design. Awakened gives you the tools to complete a dungeon in a wide variety of ways, and it lets you strike a balance between speeding up your dungeon run and having to deal with some extra mechanics at the same time. It's a great affix, and I think it will have a lot of staying power. It actually makes Mythic Plus dungeons above a 10 fun for me again, so I'm excited to try and push our keys every week for the rest of the expansion, or at least the next few months. If you are put off of Mythic Plus because of beguiling, give it another shot. The Awakened affix might just breathe the life back into dungeons for you, and hey, we also have Mechagon Mythic Plus keys now. Those have been pretty fun so far too. Moving on, a new raid tier is always something to be excited for because the encounter design team always seems to do a fantastic job with raids. They have a great stage with the Ny'alotha raid too, but how did everything actually pan out? Pretty good for the most part, I have to say. There are some quirky bosses in there that are a little weird, like the Zanesh encounter where you're playing some good old-fashioned football for, well, about 30 seconds or so. Only a handful of you raid really get to play around with that special mechanic though. The rest of you are just slapping away a relatively boring health pool with some loot attached to it. The rest of the fight isn't very exciting at all, but there's that burst of, oh, this is new, that's kind of cool, but now it's over mechanic. Another weird one is Drestagath, where you have to kill the tentacle ants to be able to DPS the boss at all. It's an interesting concept. We've had kind of similar fights before where you can't damage the main boss until a wave of ads is dealt with or whatever, but honestly this fight just ends up dragging on a bit too long. The vast majority of our raids summed up this fight as, I have no idea what I'm really supposed to be doing here, but the boss died anyway. This was probably the worst received fight in my guild, and I have to agree with that, but at least the dev team are trying new things every now and then. If some don't work, well, they don't work, but if they don't try new things, then we'll just have patchwork after patchwork, and that's just boring. The rest of the raid was fun to work through. We cleared both normal and heroic in the first week. We'll be clearing heroic again this week and starting our mythic progress. We expect to get maybe 3 or 4 bosses down, so I'm looking forward to that. There's a good difficulty curve through the entire raid. Rathian works incredibly well as an introductory fight to the raid tier. There's quite a bit going on in the fight, but he's not particularly dangerous, and you move through a few awesome mass ad fights to keep you on your toes. Raden looks like he might be a bit of a wall for some of the more casual guilds with his DPS check for the second phase, and getting to Carapace is a great feeling. The Carapace fight itself is a bit wonky at first with the tentacles, but I think it's an amazing encounter overall. Definitely my favourite fight in this new raid tier by far. There's so much going on. You have to manage your sanity, dodge tentacles, work through 3 phases, and then burn him down at the end with the masses of ads that spawn. It's a lot of fun. The raid does end on a bit of a sour note though. The actual Ny'alotha encounter is a bit of an empty shell when compared to the Carapace fight, which is super weird. You'd think the final boss with Ny'alotha himself would be the one where the dev team really let loose and just went crazy, but half of the fight is just the first phase repeated over and over, and then the second phase is just burn the boss down. That doesn't mean it's an easy boss, it's actually kind of tight on the DPS checks, it's just very simple and repetitive. I had expected more from an old god boss, and the ultimate raid encounter for the Battle of Azeroth expansion. G'huun had more going on, Jaina had significantly more going on, Queen Azshara was a monster of a fight compared to this. Ny'alotha is just kind of disappointing. There is a mythic only phase though, so hopefully that can redeem things a little bit. It's just a shame that the vast majority of players will be stuck with a version of the fight that feels very half-baked. I wouldn't be surprised if the last encounter was supposed to be the Carapace fight and Ny'alotha fight smashed together, but the dev team realised it would be too long and cumbersome, so they cut the last section out and just tried to make another boss encounter out of it, only to leave us with a rather uninspired last boss fight. If the raid ended with a Carapace fight, somehow I think people might actually have been happier, but I'll definitely be tuning into the world first race to see what that special mythic only phase is all about. It might just redeem the last boss of the last raid of this expansion. For the most part though, this is an amazing raid that I would encourage you to check out if you enjoy this kind of content in World of Warcraft. As for the story of patch 8.3, this is definitely more of a mixed bag. I think the introduction questline worked really well for setting the stage and explaining the different moving parts of the patch, and then we just have a massive leap from that into the raid. Then the raid just wraps everything up quickly without really working through the story. We free Azshara and she gives Rathian the Xal'atath dagger to use against Ny'alotha. We clear out the entirety of Ny'alotha to set up some beacons to use our super weapon against the old god, and then we head up to Ny'alotha himself and Rathian gives him a quick poke. We have no idea if that actually did anything, so then we just erase Ny'alotha from existence, apparently. There's some, ooh, but what if Ny'alotha isn't actually dead theories floating around, but until the dev team brings him back for whatever reason they can think of, I guess we've just seen the last of the old gods for now. It feels pretty rushed, and kind of like the dev team just wants this expansion over with so it can move into the next one, which promises to be quite a bit better on all fronts. I guess it's actually kind of a fitting end to Battle for Azeroth though, because the overall story of this expansion has been all over the place. It's just disappointing to see this specific story arc begin and end within a single patch. I'm sure we'll see more of the Void later on though, so maybe they're saving the good stuff for then. All in all, I think from a gameplay perspective, this patch does do a good job. The daily content might be a make or break for you, but if you can get past that, then the rest is actually fantastic. I love the horrific visions, the Mythic plus affix is one of the better ones we've seen this expansion, the raid is gorgeous and a great experience, minus the last boss, so if you enjoy playing World of Warcraft, I reckon you should enjoy playing this patch. I'm definitely having fun, though there are some concerns about how long it will actually last. The dev team currently has no plans for a patch 8.3.5, so this is all we're getting until the pre-patch for Shadowlands, I guess. Hopefully Shadowlands doesn't take forever to release, but either way we're in 8.3 for the long haul, at least until the end of summer. I don't think it has enough content to keep us occupied for that long, but for the next few months I'll definitely be happy. That's probably my biggest complaint or my biggest gripe. The content that's there is good, there just isn't really a lot of longevity if you don't like pushing Mythic Plus and you don't raid Mythic raiding. So we'll see how that all pans out. What do you think about patch 8.3 so far? What's your favourite part of the patch and why is it horrific visions? What do you think brings the patch down? What are you not enjoying? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.